If you are using Salesforce out there, this episode is for you. Welcome to another episode of the Virtual Ninja Show. My name is Heike and I have Doug with me. Doug, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Heike. I'm Doug Cranston. I'm a senior security researcher at Microsoft, and I've been focusing on Salesforce and our other third-party apps for quite a while now.
And that's why I got you here, because I would love to hear from you, Doug. What are some of the recent attacks targeting Salesforce?
Absolutely. So there's been a few different threat groups that are really interested in Salesforce lately. Salesforce holds a lot of sensitive data for organizations, so naturally it becomes a big target of theirs. So there's been a number of different types of attacks. We call them some supply chain attacks, where applications that are connected with Salesforce to do various tasks have been compromised, and from there, these attackers are able to get into Salesforce and steal data. There's been other types of attacks where user accounts are compromised, and while they have access to many different applications that those users have access to, Salesforce again becomes a natural landing spot for them to have access to all sorts of customer data, sensitive data that organizations don't want to be leaked.
Yeah, and can you share a little bit on what's the impact of our customers when such an attack actually hits them?
Yeah, there's a couple of different angles to this. So that right off the bat, the threat actors, they like to go right to extortion. They're going to say, "Hey, company, if you don't pay us, then we're going to leak all of this information." So that's sort of method number one.
Sounds a little bit like ransomware. So
it actually is. It really is. It's, they're not necessarily encrypting this data, but they're saying, "Hey, we've got it, and we're going to release it." And often there's very sensitive information in there, so it's a bit of a motivator for them right there. They're also trying to contact some of the individuals who had their data stolen. They're going right to them and saying, "Hey, like we stole data from this other guy. If you pay us, then we won't release your information." So they're somewhat crafty and they're trying to get paid however they can.
So I read in our article that it's about abuse of OAuth tokens, connected apps, sessions, even APIs. They often bypass MFA and traditional controls. So of course, we want to ask customers first to maybe strengthen these different targets. But if that's not the case, like what else should they do?
We suggest constant monitoring, right? To keep an eye on the activity of these applications to make sure that it's as expected. When it comes to protecting accounts, a lot of accounts now we have set up single sign-on to applications to make it easier for the end user, but it makes those accounts all that much more valuable, right? Because when somebody can get access to that one account, they can now move into all these different platforms quite easily. So, all of the standard advice to have MFA, phishing resistant authentication mechanisms, definitely want to make sure all of those are in place. But again, I'll always go back to constant monitoring. Let's make sure that the activity coming from these applications and these users is as we expected.
So I know that we do have a Defender for Cloud Apps Salesforce connector that exists already for a while. That's not new. But let's clarify first, like, why should our customers actually use this connector to monitor Salesforce activities? What's crucial about it?
Absolutely. So Salesforce has a great event monitoring system in place. And that's what we use with the Defender for Cloud Apps connector. So when that is connected to Defender for Cloud Apps, we'll start bringing in all of the events from Salesforce directly from your users, what they're doing. It's sort of a great way to bring everything into one place. There's also extra analytics that are done on top of those events. So if any events from your users start to have uncommon properties, for instance, there's automatic anomaly detection that's in place that will flag those. So when you do a query on that data in Defender, you'll be able to filter for things that look different, and you can kind of focus on those.
I understand now that Salesforce also has an event monitoring in Salesforce. Is there something different than we do, or is it just that basically instead of going to all the different SaaS applications you have one by one, we collect everything in one dashboard, or is there more?
That's kind of the benefit is like, yes, they do have their own, but bringing it into ideally where all of your other events are, like if they're already a Defender customer, they've already got all sorts of events, we're putting it in one spot so that it's a lot easier. And then we have that added benefit of those extra analytics that I mentioned that we're doing on top of their data. So I don't want to say that Salesforce event monitoring isn't sufficient. It's great, but we're just sort of adding some extra value.
So customers that already have the Salesforce connector, I know that we are also here because we have a couple of enhancements with the Salesforce connector. Can we talk through these? I know it's 3. Let's start with the first one.
Absolutely. The updated connector is now making use of Salesforce's real-time event monitoring platform. So this is a part of Salesforce's platform that pushes out events at a much higher rate and makes them available a lot quicker than their other methods for event retrieval. Now, the Salesforce app connector for Defender for Cloud Apps previously wasn't making use of this. So there was a bit more latency and perhaps a little bit less detail on the events that were being received. So with this update, we're getting events quicker, which means that we can detect those anomalies quicker, and all of the threat detections that we have in place will happen at a much higher speed, which is only good for everybody, really. So that's one big part of it. There's also a few new events that are being received. So Salesforce has some threat detections that they're doing on their side, which are now going to flow through into Defender for Cloud Apps, which is fantastic. And some of the events, API events, reporting events, for example, we're now receiving more information on the events that are coming through. And those are all going to be available in Cloud App Events once the new connector is enabled.
Okay, before we get to the new connector, I also understand this is an activity that needs to be done by the Salesforce admins on the Salesforce side of the house. Basically, enable that storing data, and then we can grab it. That's correct?
Correct. There's a couple of checkboxes, couple of configuration settings to make sure that it's set up to work with the updated connector.
Mm-hmm. Okay, super. And then we have another new capability, which is basically highly privileged and unused apps insights. What does that mean?
In the Defender portal, currently you can view information about Entra applications connected through Microsoft 365. And now we're increasing the amount of information available that you can see for Salesforce OAuth applications. So it's relatively in the same spot in the portal, but now there's new insights available. So you can view applications that have elevated permissions, and you can also view information about when these applications were last used. So with that information, you can say filter for applications that have not been used in a certain period of time. We know that sometimes applications are installed and set up for maybe a certain purpose or a very time-limited use, and then forgotten about. So this is a great way to get visibility on any applications that are sort of hanging out that perhaps should be removed.
So, of course, Doug, that also brings AI into the picture because there's a lot of apps that Salesforce might be connected with or to that are doing insights. And many customers go into non-human identities when it comes to using AI. So, do you see this as a researcher being targeted or being leveraged, as well as how that new updated Salesforce connector helps with that?
Absolutely. AI, of course, is only increasing in its use and definitely becoming a bit of a vector for attacks. Anytime we're talking about an identity, user or non-human, it could be a pathway to any kind of attack. So certainly, non-human identities are what we're talking about when we're integrating with other SaaS platforms, when we're connecting Salesforce with other platforms. It's a non-human identity that's set up to make that connection. And when we're talking about AI, there could be AI involved in those other SaaS platforms. There's lots of AI available for use in Salesforce. So this gives us a good window to see what those non-human identities are doing.
Thank you. And then the last one is basically the permissions visible to for the Salesforce OAuth apps, which now gives you a list of all these applications. That's another big enhancements for customers using the Salesforce connector in Defender for Cloud Apps. So, Doug, if a customer already has the connector, what do they need to do in order to benefit from that? Do they need to uninstall or just toggle something? Do you know?
Mhm. Absolutely. So the updated connector is currently in public preview, so it's available. It's not a new connector; it's just an updated version of the same connector. So once that is enabled, there are some minor configuration changes that we'll need to make in Salesforce, and the public documentation for our Salesforce connector will walk a customer through that so that it's nice and easy.
Yeah. So, and then, of course, for all customers that do not yet have the Salesforce connector, it's a big call to action here. Please get it. Doug, so once the connector is either now in place for the first time or they updated it, what are the additional values that they now get from this?
For sure. So those Salesforce events that if you didn't have the connector before, you're going to now see all of those through Defender. You can use advanced hunting to make queries against your Salesforce data, which is fantastic. It's all in one spot. You're going to see them a little bit quicker if you've updated the connector. And with this updated connector, you're going to see those Salesforce threat detections. So they're doing some anomaly detection that will now appear in your events in Defender. And we're also planning on pushing out alerts for some of those threat detections. So if there are some threats detected within your Salesforce environment that Salesforce has picked up on, we're going to try and make sure those are visible in your alerts page on Defender.
So it's basically visibility, detection, response, all of these needed tasks or insights that will be available when you have that updated connector. Doug, thank you so much for being my expert on today's episode, and thanks everyone for watching, and I hope I'll see you all soon. Bye.